and welcome to us at SAS Institute. I'm standing here today with Pernilla Hettel. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you, Marika.
Cool. So the reason we're standing here today is because we at SAS are proud partners to Women in Tech Sweden. And today we are hosting a panel together with them on the topic of responsible AI. And what we hope with this hour is that all of us will leave inspired by each other and then learn from each other how we can leverage AI for a fairer tomorrow. So we have our panel here, you'll see them very soon.
Business case.
To get started. We have all of you at home, the chat's open. Please do send your comments, questions, ideas and thoughts during this hour. We will try to get some questions at the end. But if we don't have time for it, we will follow up afterwards. So I think with that, we are actually ready to go. Pernilla, would you like to kick us off perhaps and tell us a little bit by why we at SAS thinks that responsible AI is so very important?
Definitely, Marika. So we are here to discuss responsible AI. And it's a topic that is not only extremely interesting, but it's also very important for all of us. We are surrounded by data and by technology. And the use of AI or artificial intelligence is constantly developing and expanding broadly across our society. However, we need to understand and consciously work with technology and AI so that it is implemented in a fair and responsible manner. Technology is developed by humans, and humans are by nature biased. We all have our opinions, our prejudice that we have inherited or picked up along the way, either consciously or unconsciously. We make decisions based on these bias or based on our gut feeling. And data is created and interpreted by humans. So bias also exists in data. And our biases, including prejudice, are transferred into the AI applications that are developed because machine learning models or AI models are trained on the data that include our prejudice and our bias. So that means that we need to be aware of the bias in the data and we need to work with our models based on that awareness. AI is developed to automate decisions, small or big decisions. And that means in reality that AI is also the amplifier of bias unless we take care. And this is where responsible AI comes into the picture. Responsible AI works with bias, explainability, and accountability. So, first of all, we should try to eliminate bias. We can do that by ensuring diversity in all aspects of working with AI, both in the data that we work with, but also in the teams who are working with us. A diverse team is a strong team. And they will see things from many different angles, many different points of view. And just by that, we can make it more diverse and reflect many perspectives of our data instead of just one point. They will also be more likely to detect bias simply by being diverse in the team, simply by having different focus. Secondly, AI algorithms needs to be explainable so we understand on what basis automation or automatic decisions are being made. And then finally, we are accountable for the continuous work with processes, monitoring and governance of our AI models that we develop. Now, I will hand over the word to Ola, who will be the facilitator of the panel today.
Okay. Thank you very much, Pernilla. So let's kick it off with a very open question. Who are you? Quick intro and your angle towards AI. So let's start with you.
Thank you. My name is Ebba Carbonnier and I work as a portfolio manager for nationally scalable solutions for health. And of course, the possibilities with AI and ML and the data handling within health and care are enormous. So I'm looking forward to talking about that and how we do it in the right way.
Thank you.
Yes, hi everyone. My name is Josefin Rosén and I'm leading the Nordic AI and Analytics team here at SAS. And what we do basically is to help organizations cross industry with everything that is AI and analytics. But as our customers very much right now quickly are moving from experimentation and isolated projects towards more scaling and operationalizing AI, one of our key missions right now would be to make sure that they do that in a responsible manner, to basically help them to put responsible AI into action.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, Pranav here from Stora Enso. I'm working with our digital advisory and business model function, which means together with my team, then we are responsible for supporting our different line organizations and helping them define the strategies for digitalization and transformation, and helping them to also at the same time execute new top line transformation businesses.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Rebecka, Ryder. I work as an investment director today at Industrifonden, and Industrifonden is an investor into transformational technologies that can really sort of solve important problems for our industry and society. I currently work with 9 companies and on the board of these companies, and several of these are within data infrastructure or using applied AI in different ways. And I also wrote our investment thesis into artificial intelligence. So here, ethical considerations on responsible AI is really, really important. Yeah. And I really like the quote that you showed before, what we need to think about when investing into AI.
Thank you.
It's really good.
I'm Christina. I work for PostNord Group within the strategy department, and I'm head of the analytics team. PostNord is a quite old company, almost 400 years, and my team is a small team that try to move PostNord in a transformative direction of using new technologies. So what we do is actually strive to make PostNord more efficient, to have more clever models, to make less impact on the environment, and everything that comes within logistics. Stop carrying around air in the parcels. It could be anything actually. Read the parcels in a better way. And for me and my team, it's not only about the AI, it's about analytics in a larger scale, and AI can be a part of it. So I'm actually on this learning journey with you tonight.
Good, thank you. So as you can hear, the combined knowledge we have in the panel today comes from different industries with different maturities, and AI, I think all of us, we somehow relate to AI. But what was true yesterday is not necessarily true today or even tomorrow, because AI is maturing fast. And I'm not only talking about technologies, it's how we are introducing it into organizations in different industries, in different use cases and business model, and not the least, how people are affected by it. So I would like to turn to Rebecka and, how is your organization working with AI today, and how is the angle in your discussions and how you take decisions?
Yeah, so from an investor perspective and from the perspective of being on the board of several companies using AI in different ways, evaluating 2 things I think are sort of our focus. Number 1 is how is the AI designed, and number 2 is the purpose of the design. And this is something we need to evaluate ongoing, and especially before investing into new AI. And when we look at how, it's a lot about how the applied AI can actually be trusted and the trustworthiness. And when looking at this, I think we touched upon it in the initial good presentation. It's all about data, right? If it's shit in, shit out, as you say, right? And we need to make sure that the company has put in place proper monitoring, proper traceability and explainability into their data, and have an infrastructure in place for their data. And also that the training data is representative for the result you want to generate. And often models rely on historical data, and it can become invalid fairly quickly, so you need to access real-time data. And when it comes to the purpose of design, I think this is the hardest part, right? To be able to look a few steps ahead. You might have a harmless application today, but how can this AI be used further down the line? And as an investor, that's probably the hardest thing, right? So you might have a harmless drone delivering a package today, but how can that be used further down the line? So here, I think, I mean, the EU ethical guidelines for trustworthy AI, I think are really good to look at as an investor if you're looking into AI. But you also need to sort of, be able to think a few steps ahead. And that's definitely the hardest thing. And I think we need some sort of regulation. And there is regulation coming out of EU. We're going to talk about it.
Yes.
But I don't think it's, there yet. I think there's more things needed, but I think we need this on a global scale as well. So getting the purpose right, we need to cooperate. And I think from us, we encourage companies to think about the purpose, not just how to generate great analytics or business result, but also think about how can I actually use AI to solve significant problems that really matter for the industry or the society at large. And that's what I'm hoping to see more of.
Super. And you are in the front line of the business, looking at companies where you're about to invest. I'm thinking about you, Ann-Christine. 400 years old company. What's your view? What's your perspective here?
I would say this is like a huge cultural change that we need to educate the company. We need to start from the executive team. Because I mean, even though we can find the business case and the pain points within the organization, it's correct as you say that the data. It's all about the data. If we build an artificial intelligent model with the wrong data, it could be really bad for the business and for other people. Actually, make really bad impact.
I just want to comment here. Maybe we have a competition 400 years old and some of my organizations, Lund University and Karolinska Institute, that is 200 years old. So we're young, right? But we still have this thing with the data. And also one perspective, I mean, we have many different target groups who are going to use the applications and data. And for example, in healthcare, we talk about healthy and risk and sick. And most of it is in the sick area. But of course, nowadays, we have to be able to handle the data from the healthy people as well, because we come with our Garmin or Apple or whatever we have and have to handle this whole chain and validate the models and the design of the models all the way through. And also with very sensitive data, of course, in the healthcare.
Yeah. And Pranav, you come in representing Stora Enso, also a company with long-standing traditions.
Yes. Nearly 800 years.
800 years. So, wow. Where do you get your, input and ideas, and what's your view?
Yeah, I mean, for us, data, having access to data is thankfully not a problem. I mean, we have been collecting data for a long time. Like most other companies. And I think the problem has been how do we use it in a meaningful and a safe way. And I mean, we have had, on a group level, we have had a large transformation agenda for some time now, where we have been looking at how do we, I think like most other companies here, how we can leverage these new technologies in order to make ourselves better, in order to serve the community better and to create better value. AI is of course one part of it, but that's not where we stop. And for us, of course, then more specifically for this topic, when we talk about more ethical use of AI or ethical use of data, we have actually also adopted a version of the EU ethical guidelines, where maybe not all those, I think there are about 100 questions there, maybe not all those 100 questions for every single application, but we have our own version where we, from a central point of view, look at how certain applications will be developed, how will they be used, and what the implication or the worst case scenario could be. And for us, then it's not always about the business case, that whether it makes sense or not from a financial point of view, but whether it makes sense from a human point of view.
Yeah.
And then we have stopped projects where even though it did make business case sense, it just doesn't make human sense.
So and I also guess, Pranav, 800 years of traditions, AI, a couple of years history. So where do you?
Yeah, I think, I mean, that, and this topic, you can, just pick the word AI out of it and put any other word in it. It still makes sense. It's all about human perception. It's all about change management from my point of view. It's about understanding how something can be done, and how do you make sure that you move from point A of change to point B of change in a least disruptive way.
Just a reflection on that. Of course, I agree, but also this saying that what is the asset? And that has, of course, changed, that the data is an asset now, and maybe the most valuable asset as well. And for example, in this chain that I work with within healthy, risk, sick, it could also be that the data that the individuals generate themselves, that is even more of an asset than what is just the data within the healthcare.
Yeah.
Because that could be just the logistic system and the paying model. So we have to look even more at the individual and who owns that data as well.
Yeah, and I also think that the data is only worth something if you know how to utilize the data. It could also be a cost if you keep collecting a lot of data that you don't know how to use.
I think that's such a common mistake that companies make. That
we have a lot of data.
Yes, we've started collecting data, right? But have we actually started validating and structuring the data so we can use the quality of it?
And now we have a data lake that you can go swim in, but you don't know how to use it. No, I was also thinking, you said something really interesting, because it's not about the technology, it's about transformation. This is change management, and I think that is also why in an old company, and now you have an older one though, but we need to start educating them that this is not, hello, here we have a cool service within AI. No, now we need to think and adopt this process in another way. We need to train ourselves how to add AI or some other technology into the way of working.
Yeah. And I think that the commonality we have, as you can hear, we are all in different industries. We have all, flavors of it, but the commonality is a couple of things. It's the data, because we're all depending on the data. Then we are applying different use cases on top of it. And the development is moving fast. And we just need to, be in the front line without losing too much, of ground while we are introducing it. And at the end, it's probably a balance between the technology, the legislations that we will discuss in a couple of minutes, and also the people. So in order to see more commonalities, I was thinking, what could we learn from each other? We're all representing different industries. And I think, Ebba, if you had a flavor on that.
Yeah, the basics which we've touched upon here is also to have good quality structured data. That we can learn from each other. And for example, within healthcare, we have a lot going on within, I again point towards this healthy risk sick model, that we have a lot going on and a lot of AI projects within the sick part, but we're also looking at now sort of cleaner data, because you have multi-diseased older persons and the data is very scattered and not so easy. So we're looking at also this sort of, for example, prevention of childhood obesity, where we have cleaner data. It's not with all diseases. So start somewhere with easier data sets and perhaps with not directions of so much bias. Yeah.
So, Christine, again, going back to PostNord, the way you have introduced it, do you have some experiences you can share from this perspective?
Yeah, I would say that what we start, if you're talking according to the data.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, we hijacked this process actually, because I don't think anyone from PostNord is listening, but I mean, we have this traditional IT department. A lot of companies have a traditional IT department with a lot of legacy. If you're not a startup company and you can choose what you want to collect and store it in the cloud, and so we have a lot of physical servers and a lot of data that we really don't know what we are, what is the purpose. And we have data in different spots and in silos. So what we said is actually, okay, if we are driving this, we need to actually set up a data platform that is only for this purpose, to do these new models. And we find the data source, and then we actually fetch the data into the new data platform that we set up as a test, and now it's there to stay. And then we structure the data in that way we need it actually to build the models. And some data can take us 6 months to get, and some data does not really exist, so we need to start collecting new data points. So the thing is, you really need to understand the model you want to build and what data you need to put in there. But I think, it's a lot of work with the data platform.
Yeah. Do you think there is a difference? Yes, all use cases are unique, but the way you manage them, the governance you have around it, do you think that is similar across industries?
Yeah, I think so, but I can't be sure. I'm in the postal business, but I believe so.
Yeah, because I know, Ebba, you and I discussed that briefly. The learnings we can do, we have the gaming industry. They talk a lot about experiences, What can we learn from them? Not their use cases in specific, but the way they are governing their use cases and the way they look at responsible AI and ethical AI, which is a very hot topic in that industry.
And what I think you can see from these upcomers or companies that doesn't have legacy, they work in a different way. They work faster. They do trial and error. It's not bad to failure, but you need to know quickly, is this a model we should, put more money in, more effort in, or should we just throw it away? Yeah. So I think from being in a traditional company, you actually need to adopt to work with this. You need to adopt another way of working. And that is why it can't really be in a maybe traditional IT where you work with safe, agile, or whatever model.
Pranav.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, but I think in that one, we also face similar challenges in the beginning, where we try to see, okay, how can we be more innovative from a culture point of view? How can we, as you said, make sure that it's okay to fail, that you don't have to invest a year into something and then realize it doesn't work. And eventually what we landed on was, I think, what sometimes gets referred to as bimodal IT or two mode of IT, where we also have a traditional IT organization where it's more of a service business, but we also have a transformation office which sits sort of as a sister to IT, where we drive exclusively just innovation and new idea generation. So for us, then we have developed our own model, our own way of working, somewhat separated from the rest of IT, where we actually feed what we produce in terms of potential services back into IT much quicker than normally what would have happened.
And I'm thinking, Rebecka, because you probably look at this from a slightly different angle, because where you are about to invest, maybe they don't make a difference between business and IT, because they have a vision, and an idea and want to change the world.
Yeah.
So how do you get the ethical and responsible aspects into their ideas that when you're discussing with them?
I think that's something we need to work on more.
Yeah.
And I think it's easy that the responsibility of ethical AI, responsible AI ends up in a silo function, or it ends up at one person's desk or a few people's responsibility, even in younger companies.
Yeah.
So I definitely think you need like a shared sort of knowledge and education across the line with everyone working in an alignment of sort of what we want to accomplish and an alignment on sort of potential, dangers and potential harmful or biases or understanding of the data. But I think what my company is an advantage from younger companies is that we can set up the data infrastructure from scratch and get it right. So you can have explainability, you can have traceability in place through your data infrastructure. And that's something I experience a lot with sort of maybe legacy companies with legacy systems, that, you know, there's still a lot of investments needed into proper data infrastructure so you can actually have models in production. Because I hear about, you know, ambitious AI projects and a lot of POCs put in place, but the fact is that up to 80% of all of these POCs or pilots never end up in production. So how can we move that so that, you know, a few more at least end up actually being models in production, generating ROI to the companies? And I think often it comes back to the data infrastructure not being right.
Josefin.
And I agree, and I'm glad you said, because I mean, it all starts with data, and it's easy to get stuck there. And I mean, but that to develop the model is just really the beginning of a journey towards getting value from data and analytics, because it's just not until we get them in production that we can actually start to get value from them. And then the challenge is to make sure that they continue to create value and that they continue to also make relevant and correct decisions also over time. And for that, we need, just like you also brought up, a governance structure that we make sure that we can monitor them, that we can update them and retrain them and replace them also. And I mean, we noticed, I guess, during COVID that a lot of things changed in a very short time, and a lot of historical data, a lot of models all of a sudden were no longer relevant. So I mean, even if we have data today, it's also important that we also look into bringing in new data and being able to update the models so that we are not driving decisions based on models that no longer really reflect the work of it.
That's so true. And I think that's also a journey for a lot of companies make, that you need to access to real-time data. You need to be streaming data in real time. And you might not even have your historical data in place. So that's a big journey, I think, for a lot of companies to make.
Fantastic. So I regardless, you know, if you're working in a startup or a company with a history, if you are in healthcare or if you are in manufacturing, I hear more and more things we have in common. And since we are on a journey, it's about, you know, helping each other constantly to raise the bar, raise the knowledge and understanding how we are doing things. So my question would be, do we have this kind of forums today, which goes cross industries, cross enterprises?
I think we're lacking that a lot. I mean, I personally appreciate channels like LinkedIn and various MeetUp to be able to share across industries and across companies. But I see when working with our customers that a lot of them, they don't have exchange and sharing of experience even within the company and between departments and between teams. And we need to start there. At least,
But I also think that, you know, it's an abstract area for people who don't know. So it's not really easy to go out internally and to talk about this, because it's a little bit like science fiction. We hear what you say, but you need to show results. So it's easier to actually go external and share your story with the other people who are interested and other people in the same, you know, with the same questions or challenges.
It's usually the most easy way to visualize is what we usually have in our hand, and that's optimized all the time, every day, and it's AI all the time. Then people start understanding. I wanted. Go ahead, Rebecka.
No, because I was thinking, and in terms of the proposed EU regulation that is on the table today, I feel that we are lacking that sort of common or broader discussion in Sweden, in our society, because this is about ethics that affects our everyday life, and we need to get it right. And we need to find a forum where more actors and industry players and people can have a discussion on how to shape these ethical guidelines in the right way. And we need that.
And that brings me into the next sort of section here. It's about the legislations. And I think if we look into some industries, innovation and development, that has been highly regulated in different ways to control the outcome. for some reason, the IT landscape is more of a free open space. Everything is possible, which is good. And very few things have been, regulated. I think that is rapidly changing with the introduction of AI and the capabilities of AI, because the impact in both business and for human beings is simply too high. So we need to put the framework in place. So I'm thinking, Josefin, recently there has formed a new legislation around responsible AI. So maybe kicking in an open door, but why do we need it? But more important and interesting, what could be the impact of it? I know there are good things that we control it, but could it also be a flip side that we're actually holding back innovation because of this? What's your view?
Well, I think first of all, I think it's necessary with the legislation, and I think that it is a very important milestone towards getting citizens to trust and also to feel safe using AI, and just get everyone at home also on the same page. European Commission presented back in April this year a new regulation. It's the first AI regulation, and it is dividing AI into 4 risk categories, and that is, it is unacceptable risk, it's high risk, it's limited risk, and it's minimal risk, and it's AI in the high risk category that is highly affected here. And that is AI that could affect individuals' safety and human rights and economy and things like that. And one of the main concerns from the field has been, just like you say, that it would inhibit and slow down innovation, and that all the tests and assessments and documentations and reporting they are proposing would actually become a bottleneck that would delay deployment. And that could definitely be true, and it potentially could be like that. But I would like to see it as we need to realize that AI, responsible AI, can never be an afterthought. It needs to be enabled, first of all, in the platform, and it also needs to be embedded, baked into the process. And then we also need to consider it at every stage of the AI life cycle. And if we're managing to do that, I think then it's not a problem, because then it's already, we are already taken hype for it.
And I think uncertainty can be a bottleneck in itself. The waiting for potential regulation can sometimes be more damaging than actual regulation, because you don't know what the playing rules and field looks like.
Exactly.
So, but I think,
so far it's been more of a responsibility that everyone has, because we're ahead of regulation. But now the regulations are keeping up with us, and I think that's super important and very, very good.
And we as funders within healthcare and life sciences and Industrifonden as funders as well, of course, we have a responsibility when we fund projects and companies to really have the criteria of responsible AI and what model and how has it been trained and on what data. So that is.
So I think a legislation, that's something that we have all been asking for, because it will make it easier at the end to get something sustainable out there in production, if we can look at those aspects and lean back towards the legislation from beginning. But I'm thinking, Ebba, sort of healthcare is a bit in the front line in how far you are in AI implementations. So for new things, that's fine. Rebecka, you have an easy life with your company because they're in early phases. But for things that has already been implemented, use cases which are already in production, how should we go about it to make sure that they also get adopted to the legislations?
I think still, since it's quite a regulated industry, healthcare and life science, it's more of the thing that, for example, the FDA, the Federal Drug Agency, and also the Etikprövningsnämnden, which is most likely called something like the Swedish Ethics Review Authority, they have to improve and learn more as well, because they are the ones that have to approve of the applications, and even the ones that are being used now. So we have to raise the knowledge level and also the criteria that is being used for accepting different applications. And for example, there are some areas which is definitely more easy, since, for example, in diagnosing a tumor, if there is cancer with the imaging, then there is very little bias, because you don't know who it is or what the person is like or anything. There are no, it's just the tumor. So diagnosing, for example, with sepsis in blood and tissue, tumors, those areas, it's definitely easier. But when it comes to other applications, where, let's say, if there would be facial recognition or how we walk, or do we have a disease, does it show when we walk, then it's definitely more challenging to what should be approved and how should it be approved, because there can be so much bias, and how do you train those models then for those kind of applications?
And also, as you say, you already have a framework of legislation. So then I turn the question to you, Ann-Kristin, and Posten. The contact you have with your AI robots in your customer centers. I know you have good stories. It's good to have a legislation there.
But this one also uses voice and speaks with the customers. We don't really let it train the models itself. So from the beginning, we read a lot of data. We had to read the conversation between the machine and the human, and you know, we actually decided very early stages that the machine cannot repeat what the customer says, because this can be really, really bad. Because the machine is not native Swedish, and the machine actually talks to, you know, something else to ask, what did this person say now, and what should I, you know, how could I repeat? So instead we said, you can only write it down, and then we will read this. So I don't know how many thousands of lines, conversations, you know, we've been reading, and, you know, a lot of upset customers from the beginning. So what I think is actually, if you're unsure and if you don't want to, you know, make damage, you should do supervised training. That could be, even though this AI solution is not talking straight to people, you should do supervised training before you let it start training themselves. And I think also what we see now is that if we go back to the legislation, explainability, you know, that is really important. When I said from the beginning, this is like a cultural, educational, informative journey we're on. If we can explain it from the beginning, I mean, why do we have this prediction, and what is the input we are giving to the model, so people can understand? Then we make transparency, we build trust, and, you know, we will probably also follow the legal purposes.
Yeah. And I think, Rebecka, from an investment point of view, I guess this is quite high on the agenda, but I also foresee that your counterpart, the guys and girls coming with all the innovation, that's probably not top of their agenda initially, but it will be. So my thinking is, how do you make sure that this becomes sustainable? It's good, you know, to say, in order for us to, you know, do our investment, you need to think of this and this and this. But what happens in 1 year's time, 2 years' time? What can we do to make sure this becomes, you know, in the next version or whatever they do, it becomes a natural way of thinking and adopting to the legislations?
I think we need to integrate this in the broader sort of sustainability work that we do with our companies. So we always do a sustainability due diligence, and we always do an evaluation of the responsible and ethical aspects of AI. And sustainability doesn't end with the due diligence. That's something that's always ongoing in our companies from a board perspective. What's the diversity? What's the gender division? How is the company progressing in terms of climate impact or something like that? And it needs to be the same, I think, with AI. This is something that we need to ongoing look at and always evaluate, because companies might pivot and do something else with their model, or suddenly start using other data. So this is something you really need to build in as part of sort of audit checks and monitoring ongoing, and also from a board perspective, just like we do with sustainability, something you need to ongoing sort of follow up on. Thank you.
But and also, I mean, what could help with this is that there is also a business imperative, right? I mean, those who are not, those that are breaching the rules, they will face fines of up to 6% of their global annual revenue, or I think it was 30 million euros, whatever, it was a higher figure. So for that reason, they will want to follow the legislations, and also, no one wants to find themselves hitting the headlines for the wrong reason, and we don't want to lose our customers, we don't want to lose our trust. So there are a lot of things also from the outside.
And I think it's fairly similar to GDPR and how we've dealt with that. And I mean, companies have managed to deal with that regulation, even though there was a big scare before it was implemented.
That's only 4% revenue, right?
Yeah.
So this is even worse.
It's not a lot of job, the GDPR.
Yeah, exactly. So I agree, because then it becomes just something built in. So we don't have to, of course, we have to, for quite a while now, we have to follow it up on the ethical side, but then it becomes something normal. And just like your comparison was with the GDPR, that who has access to which data, when, why, and for how long, and what models, and who trained the model, what data, and the accountability. And that came with the GDPR, the accountability for the data as well. So we have to implement that even further regarding AI.
It comes down again to that it can never be an afterthought. So it needs to be like all of these requirements and all of these demands, they need to be baked in to the process, and we need to do it like continuously over the AI life cycle, from the beginning to the actual decision at the end, and then start all over again.
Pranav, do you have any experiences from applying these legislations to your ongoing models and the discussions you're having?
I think it's still early days from a regulation point of view, but we have already adopted the initial EU assessment list into our everyday decision making. So whenever there is a new opportunity that somebody comes up with, that hey, this is something that I would like to do, then we go through that checklist from day one. So for us, of course, we also do have AI algorithms that are already in place in production. So maybe they also need to be redone at some point, if they haven't already. But for the new ones that are coming up now, it's already baked in. Of course, sorry, just to finish that thought. Of course, it does slow down the process a bit, but I think in the long term, it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, and I guess adopting and applying the responsible AI framework, of course, will look different depending on the use case that you're working on, and that gives a segue, because we picked up a question from the audience, which goes on the line: is there a difference, if the use case is very sensitive? Let's take if it's about the HR data. Do you think that will be, the legislation will be a driver to get more of those use cases, or will it be an inhibitor because it's simply, it becomes too difficult to get something which is sustainable and ethical? What do you think, Josefin?
I hope they will continue using it also in sensitive areas, and that's, I guess, what I'm like repeating all the time, that it can never be an afterthought. And if you have it baked into the process, then it's fine. But one thing I think that we haven't touched a lot on is also diversity. Pernille mentioned it in the beginning, and that we make sure that the team, and that is very important, I guess, in HR, that works with developing and deploying the algorithm and also the data, that they represent diversity. Because I often get the question, who should own AI in your organization? And for me, that needs to be a teamwork, and diversity needs to be the keyword here, because I would like to see diversity as sort of a safeguard during individual biases. And when it comes to HR, I guess we have examples from other companies that have tried to do recruitment algorithms and not succeeded. And that is because, you know, you're basing it on historical data and trying to recruit or decide on good employees based on how it has looked before. So we always need to look into what's the goal with the application. Are we looking for to hire someone like the ones that we already have? Or are we looking for something different? We need to start with the data, but also defining the goal very carefully before we start.
Yeah. And again, I hear lots of similarities here. And as you say, we are on a journey, and we're probably just at the first station of many to come. And now we have a legislation in place, so it's a good start.
Not in place yet.
Well, okay.
But yeah, coming into
place. And when it comes into place, I don't think we could just read it and put it in the shelf and start to apply it. I think this will develop a lot over time. And we have a shared responsibility to engage and make sure it happens. I don't think we will ever be successful just standing and take what someone else has done. So again, back to how do we share, you know, all the experiences we get. That will shape in legislations, but that will also shape in implementations, governance, and all this. So again, we're in different industries, but we share the same challenges.
So I think kind of like you're saying here, that it's important to create awareness about the importance of responsible AI within the whole organization. And like I say, it's not a map on the shelf, but it's actually a key part of our AI strategy that is continuously brought up. Even if it's a map on the shelf, we'll bring it out every day and have a look at it, because it's a key part of our strategy.
Yeah. So I think the big question we're asking ourselves, we are on a journey, yes. We have thousands of good ideas. We're starting to get legislations in place. We all think of what the impact and future will look like. But I think the big question, you know, is, are we in the beginning of the next industry revolution, or is this a hype that will go away and shape into something different? And I know we don't have the answer. But the question has been raised in many different forums, so I would be delighted to hear your views and inputs around it. So,
well, will there be an AI winter, quantum computing winter? And no, it's come to a stage now where I think it's used in everyday life. So I wouldn't say that it's a hype anymore. And of course, I'm working with the quantum computing teams and quantum technology teams, and we're wondering as well, but that's also coming along here. So we're hoping for that.
And I mean, we also see how COVID has speeded up adoption of digital technologies by several years. I think everyone sees AI as a competitive differentiator now, especially after COVID, I'd say.
So, yeah, we definitely see record high investments into data infrastructure as well, which I think is what has been lacking, why AI has not been used properly. I think it's been almost like with electricity. It took 100 years before electricity really revolutionized and created the second industrial revolution, because everyone had steam power and it worked perfectly. And today companies are with legacy systems and they're fine. But once you start investing and replacing into new data infrastructure that can actually enable you to have models into production, that's when it starts happening. That's when we start seeing AI a lot more. So it's happening, I think.
Yeah. And I definitely think that AI is an enabler for higher productivity and better services. And of course, you need it more in certain areas and less in others. So for some, it could be a hype.
Yeah.
But it's definitely here to stay.
I think it's up to us to prove that it is not a hype. So just make sure that we get not only the model into production, but to make sure they are sustainable. They are following the coming legislations, and you know they will keep on develop over years. But as we say, I don't think no one really knows how it will look like in just 5 years.
Just a reflection there that we in Sweden and the Nordics, usually we plan ahead and what you are pointing towards as well. And I think that it could be advantageous that we focus on even more on prediction and prevention, because of course we have to sort of decide which projects do we finance, which companies do we finance, what do we do, and we could definitely have a competitive advantage in Sweden and the Nordics to put a large amount of our AI projects within the prediction and prevention, regardless of industry. It doesn't matter if it's services or production or healthcare. So we can all think of that as well as ethical and sustainable.
Very true.
And I also see from working with customers across industry for many years now in this area that, I mean, it has changed a lot just over the last years here, that we're definitely moving from experimentation and, these just develop a model for this and develop a model for that towards operationalizing and scaling AI. I mean, that is what everyone wants to talk about now. Okay, we have realized that we don't get any value from models if we're not getting them into production. So
I think to a certain extent, at least what I've experienced as well, is it's not just about getting them into production, but it's also about, at least for large industrial companies, I would say, more than B2C. It's also about thinking about the user experience. It's thinking about whether you're forcing something into production just for the sake of saying that, yes, I'll put it in production, but nobody used it. It's the usability factor that comes into play more often than not. It's about being able to understand, if I put that into my part of my process, will somebody actually use it, or will this still go back to the old way of doing it? Then it doesn't really matter.
So true. We see that in startups as well, that you haven't actually looked at, does this problem actually need AI? Or is there usability of this solution that actually needs the machine learning? And sometimes
because a lot of projects fail because not because the product doesn't work, but just nobody wants it.
That's so true. Yeah, that's solve the problem, and if it needs AI to solve it, go ahead. If it doesn't, don't.
And of course, we shall use our fantastic gaming industry in Sweden to really have applications, regardless of industry, more addictive in a positive way. With the interfaces. So we have a lot to work on there in many industries, definitely in healthcare as well.
And also that we're a front runner in sustainability. So I think we can be a front runner in sustainable and ethical and responsible AI as well, because everyone's always talking about this race, and maybe we can be the winner and the front runner in that race.
And I think that's a good conclusion, and because I can see time's flying, and I'm thinking to all of you in the audience, I know that you're right now thinking, how will I bring all this back into my organization or my project or whatever it might be? And I can also feel, even though it's in a hybrid work model, that the energy is peaking, because now I will ask the panel to give their sort of do's and don'ts and what to think of in a very compressed format. So if you haven't done already, just pick up your paper and pen and start to take notes. So I get it.
I think it's really important to fail fast. I mean, if you have an idea, you know what data to use. Just, make a small product out of it and see if it works. Otherwise, just kill it. Find the great, simple use cases.
Good advice. Thank you.
Okay, so the don't just make a policy and a silo function internally responsible for AI. Make this as a business imperative across the business. And do invest into real data infrastructure that can help you with explainability and traceability. Like check out companies like Validio, Hopsworks, all Swedish, that are really good in data handling, or SAS probably has a solution as well for this, right? So there's so many good companies in Sweden helping you with this, so check it out. Yeah,
I think for me, it's don't think about the solution, but first think about the problem.
And I think most of what I would like to bring with you, I've already said, but I think it's also important to remember that responsible AI is actually key to a successful AI adoption, and that responsible AI is actually really, really good for business, and that can be a motivating thing.
And really, I would say also who is the customer and the target group, and also start with that, what you want to do. And then, of course, clean quality data to have the traceability and to have the transparency.
Wow, good thoughts. And I also have a learning, by the way, which I learned now. It's about sharing. This is teamwork. I think Nordic or Sweden, we should be, and we are in the front line of this. And to keep that position, we need to share, we need to learn from each other, because there are so many similarities. So I think we have all by gaining by working together. And I'm very grateful that you had the opportunity to come here today. I hope that all of you in the audience have had a pleasant time and you have made lots of good learnings. And I would like, so I represent all of you who is looking at this. So I will represent you by giving the distinguished panel a big round of applause. So thank you.